Good morning. You get me for the devotion today. I'm going to start out by reading Ephesians 4, 1 through 7 in the KJV. It says, I, therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you that you walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called, with all lowliness and meekness, with long-suffering, forbearing one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, even as ye are called in one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. But unto every one of us is given grace according to the measure of the gift of Christ. I'm just going to read the same exact verse in the MSG, just because there's something about this version that just really struck out to me. It says, in light of all this, here's what I want you to do. While I am locked up here, a prisoner for the master, I want you to get out there and walk. Better yet, run on the road God called you to travel. I don't want any of you sitting around on your hands. I don't want anyone strolling off down some path that goes nowhere. And mark that you do this with humility and discipline, not in fits and starts, but steadily, pouring yourself out for each other in acts of love, alert at noticing differences and quick at mending fences. You are all called to travel on the same road and in the same direction, so stay together both outwardly and inwardly. You have one master, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who rules over all, works through all, and is present in all. Everything you are and think and do is permeated with oneness. But that doesn't mean you should all look and speak and act the same. Out of the generosity of Christ, each of us is given his own gift. So when I was a kid, I was obsessed with the 1800s. And I literally wish I was born during the time of the Oregon Trail and the westward expansion. And I was obsessed with Dr. Quinn, medicine woman. And during the winter, my brother and sister and I, we'd build our homesteads out in the snow, and I was always the town doctor. And my grandma had made me this bathrobe. It was a long bathrobe, and I would tie it around my waist so I'd look like I had a hoop skirt on. And I pretended I was dressed like a pioneer woman. So naturally, I was obsessed with Laura Ingalls Wilder and the Little House series. And let me clarify, I don't watch the TV show because I can't stand shows that are based off books or movies like that. That's another topic for another time. So I read and read and read these books over and over again. And I lost count how many times I took them out of the library. And Little Town on the Prairie and These Happy Golden Years are my favorite. And I truly thought I was born during the wrong time period. I should have been a homesteader out in Oklahoma somewhere. And I eventually grew out of this weird westward expansion phase and became obsessed with other time periods. There was a 1940s phase with the Andrews sisters, a 1920s phase with Flappers, The Great Gatsby, and Thoroughly Modern Millie, a 1960s phase with Bob Dylan, hippies, and incense, and there was a brief period of Shakespeare in the late 1500s, and on and on. So I was born in 1980, and I was in high school in the late 90s, and for years, I truly thought I should have been born during a different time. As an adult, I look back at my weird 1800s obsession and realize I would have been the first to die of dysentery on the Oregon Trail. I hate camping. I need air conditioning. I shower every day. I never would have survived. I started to rewatch Dr. Quinn recently, and she's really annoying. Michaela needs to get off her soapbox. And I went back and reread these Little House series as an adult, and an adult perspective of YA literature is really different. So unpopular opinion, but I think Pa is a total loser with no real direction. He's a guy with wanderlust and just plain restlessness, and he just keeps putting his family in new situations. Mom must have been one wonderful, submissive wife, because the first time my husband moves me to Kansas, and I have some random dudes knocking on my door while I'm home alone and stealing from me, would have been the last. I would have packed my trunk and been on the first train back to Wisconsin. When I was young, I loved the story between Almanzo and Laura, and as an adult, I realized this is creepy. Laura is 15, and Almanzo is 25. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and there's no way a 25-year-old is picking her up for a buggy ride. And as for the other time periods, as an adult, I realized I am thankful I didn't live through World War II in the 40s. I couldn't pull off a bob, and I'm way too much of a rule follower to be a hippie. So what's the point to this? Looking back at these weird time periods made me realize that maybe being born in 1980 wasn't so bad. The 90s are back in full effect, so maybe they were cool after all. Maybe I was born exactly when I was supposed to be born. And I am here for a purpose, and I'm exactly where I am supposed to be. So this morning I want to let you know, you are here today for a purpose. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. You are alive today and where you are for a reason, for a purpose. God has a purpose and a plan for our lives. We all have a calling, and our callings are different. As Ephesians 4:7 that I opened with says, we aren't going to all look or act the same, but we are given different gifts and abilities to work towards the same cause. We have been given a calling, and it's time to answer the call and stop letting outside distractions like work, clubs, sports, on, stop us from answering the call. We are all called for such a time as this. You were born for such a time as this, and you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And I didn't want this to be a devotion about Esther, but how can I not state Esther 4:14? I'm going to read it out of the ESV. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Meaning, if Esther didn't answer the call, God would have used someone else. Just like with us. If I choose not to do what God asked me to do, he'll easily call on one of you, and vice versa. But what does that do for me and my family? Nothing. Esther's family would have perished, and someone else would have brought the Jews to deliverance. But she had to realize that she was where she was at that moment for a purpose, and she had to answer the calling. If you receive a calling from God, answer it. You can run, but you can't hide from it. It's not about what I want for my life, it's about what he wants. You need to walk worthy of the vocation wherewith ye are called, as stated in my opening scripture, Ephesians 4:1. You are supposed to live a life worthy of the calling we have received. You are here today for a purpose. You are meant to live today, July 3rd, 2022, not July 3rd, 1922, or 1822, or 1722. We are called, and we need to answer that call. As 1 Peter 2:9 says, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into this marvelous light. We don't need to doubt the Lord or wonder, why me? For as Psalm 32:8 says, I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. And in fact, Jeremiah 1:5 tells us, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. He knew us before we were even born, and he knows us and has a plan for us. God knows how it's all going to play out. Isaiah 46:10-11, the NIV says, I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. I say, my purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please. From the east I have summoned a bird of prey, from a far-off land a man to fulfill my purpose. What I have said that I will bring about, what I have planned that I will do. Job repents to the Lord in Job 42:1-6, and it says, Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that thou canst do anything, and no thought can be withholden from thee. Who is he that hideth counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered that I understood not, things too wonderful for me, which I knew not. Hear, I beseech thee, and I will speak. I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, and now mine eye seeth thee. Wherefore I abhor myself, and repent in dust and ashes. And I'm just going to read that verse again in the MSG again, just because it was another crazy interpretation to me. And it says, Job answered God, I'm convinced you can do anything and everything. Nothing and no one can upset your plans. You asked, who is this muddying the waters, ignorantly confusing the issue, second-guessing my purpose? I admitted I was the one. I babbled on about things far beyond me, made small talk about wonders way over my head. You told me, listen and let me do the talking. Let me ask the questions. You give the answers. I admit I once lived by rumors of you. Now I have it all firsthand from my own eyes and ears. I'm sorry, forgive me. I'll never do that again, I promise. I'll never again live on crust and hearsay, crumbs of rumors. And isn't this a crazy interpretation? We need to stop muddying the waters, making things confusing and second-guessing decisions when God has laid out a clear path for us. We need to stop doubting ourselves and do what God has called us to do. And I'm just going to end with my go-to verse lately, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. God has a plan and a purpose for all of us, and I need to trust it every day, answer his calling, and live a life he has intended for us. And just so you know, Pa has redeemed himself for me. And every time I read this passage, I bawl like a baby. Almanzo and Laura had just gotten married, and Laura is leaving to go to her new home with him. It reads, Laura put on her bonnet again and went out to the buggy as Almanzo drove to the door. There were goodbye kisses, good wishes, and while he stood ready to help her into the buggy, but Pa took her hand. You'll help her from now on, young man, he said to Almanzo, but this time I will. And Pa helped her into the buggy. So maybe Pa wasn't so bad after all. And maybe with my family, I could have made it on the prairie, but I'm glad to be where I am today. God bless.